What makes a good horror movie? This is a question that has been asked by anyone who strives to make movies in the genre, although it seems like they've skipped this step in recent times. Most directors would conclude that anything that gets a scream from the audience is sufficient, and overutilize jump scares to get as many screams as possible. However, the audience quickly forgets the movie soon after viewing it, and it eventually fades from our minds. If one wanted to truly find the formula that creates a terrifying horror movie, they would analyze those that have stuck with us long after we had watched them. Movies such as The Shining, The Conjuring, and The Exorcist are a few notable movies that are immediately brought up when attempting to bring the best horror movies to mind. What makes these movies so much scarier than other films in the genre? Why do people lay awake at night after viewing them? The answer is in the formula. When looking at all three of the aforementioned films, it quickly becomes apparent that they have a similar structure. It begins with a relatively normal family trying to start a new life, or being introduced to something new. Everything seems normal for a split second, but things slowly begin to unwind and the evil force begins to pervade every aspect of the family's lives. The family is skeptical at first, but something big happens that causes them to seek help. Once they finally get help, the evil force reveals itself to be something truly sinister. It takes everything that the characters have in order to beat this evil force, but it is not always permanent. This is the basic plot of all movies that I have previously mentioned. It obviously works, as the films are hailed as masterpieces in the horror genre. The films are known for their impressive writing, using this basic plot to create the overall story. While the structure definitely aids in making a movie enjoyable and interesting, it doesn't necessarily make it scary. That leads us to my next point. There are a lot of aspects that make a horror movie scary, and one that is often overlooked is the soundtrack. All three movies have a very good soundtrack that aids in absorbing the reader into the movie, creating a terrifying atmosphere and even being the source of the scare in some instances. The music is often present throughout the entire movie, whether it is playing quietly in the background to create a sense of dread or blaring to create a sense of intense fear. There are even times where the absence of music or noise causes the viewers to become unsettled and fearful of coming events. The best horror movies create unique and easily identifiable sounds and songs that don't distract from the movie, but instead become one with it. The final thing that creates a good horror movie is something that a lot of directors fear doing. Sometimes, the way to best execute the task of making a memorable horror flick is to go farther than most directors are actually willing to go. Most directors don't actually want to create a film that is too scary for the audience to enjoy, so they avoid pushing against the barrier. However, sometimes it's best to go outside of what is generally accepted and surprise the audience, as this can truly scare them. I recall a scene from The Exorcist, which is actually considered to be one of the best horror movies ever created, and it did just what I described above, in numerous scenes. The scene that I recall, however, is one of the most infamous scenes to come out of the movie, and it stays with me to this day. The scene in question involves the already possessed little girl stabbing herself in the genitals with a crucifix and screaming obscenities. This scene is extremely controversial, but it still serves as one of the most shocking and frightening visuals to ever come out of a film. My mother actually became ill and couldn't sleep after watching this specific scene, and my father refuses to watch the movie to this day. While the entire movie was filled with horror that pushed the boundaries, It was obviously a good decision on the director's part. The Exorcist is still considered to be a superior horror film in comparison to others. In conclusion, there are many factors that make a good horror movie, which include a good formula and narrative, well done soundtrack, and very little fear when it comes to pushing the boundaries. While we can enjoy all horror movies for what they are, it takes clever usage of these things in order to make one that will stand the test of time. Maybe if more directors would take note of these factors, there would be a more consistent stream of quality horror movies. In all honesty, they'll probably just make another Paranormal Activity movie and call it a day.